My topic is all about behavioral characteristics. So, what is characteristics? It is a trait that persistently describes a person's behavior, such as their voice, signature, um, keystroke, dynamics, and many more. So, in the behavioral characteristics, there are 8 common characteristics of stiffness commonly found in classroom, which are the following. So the first one is difficulty following verbal directions, difficulty with oral expressions, same difficulties with social, emotional, or interpersonal skills, will often have a degree of language delay, often follow and rarely leads, will usually exhibit some form of articulation difficulty, can become easily frustrated if their needs are not met, which may lead to behavioral difficulties or tantrums. Sometimes the use of hearing aids leads to embarrassment and fear of direct rejection from peers. So they are afraid of being bullied by the friends or classmates or peers. So hearing loss can affect a person in three main ways. First one is fewer education and job opportunities due to their impaired condition, uh, and they cannot easily communicate. Second one is social withdrawal due to reduced access to a service and difficulty communicating with others. So, third one, the last one, is the emotional problems caused by a drop in self-esteem and confidence. Deaf children generally are reported to have higher rates of aggression, inattention, and non-compliance than hearing children. The magnitude of these higher rates vary but range to from 2 to 3 times more behavior problems to the normal hearing children.
Curriculum and classroom strategies with learners with difficulty in hearing. All requirements for passing assessment must be clearly defined per subject. It is preferable that this information is provided in written format. Lecture notes, handouts, and copies of electronic presentations should be provided well in advance to students with hearing impairment to allow them to pre-read and prepare for class. Example, learn new vocabulary, terminologies, and etc. The use of visual aids to illustrate the presented topic would be most helpful. Handouts are extremely important to students with hearing impairment. These, together with hard or electronic copies of overhead transparencies or PowerPoint slides, should be given to the student via email or posted on an electronic learner management system at least 24 hours before the lecturer wherever possible to enable these students to prepare beforehand. A copy of handouts and OHT slides will be given to the note taker at the start of the lecture to facilitate annotation and referencing of the slides. Please remember to use plain language. Try to give glossaries of terminology and write new terms on the board wherever possible. Avoid idioms and jokes or play on words, as these will usually be lost on students with hearing impairment and they will understandably be curious what their peers are laughing at, which make them feel embarrassed. Try to structure teaching sessions clearly. Rapid changes of topic will defeat most lip readers. If you change the topic of conversation, make sure that the student is aware of it. Only 30 to 40% of all words can usually be seen on the lips. The student will be using contextual clues relating to the topic while making use of any residual hearing he or she might have together with lip reading to access the message. Try to be explicit at all times. When describing diagrams or graphs, do not use the word this, that, here, there. Instead, use the words that are described in the diagram. Where a student consistently struggles to grasp a particular concept after consulting with an academic tutor, it is advisable for an individual consultation with a lecturer. If the lecturer plans to show a video in class, he or she should either ensure that the video has subtitles or the video will have summaries before screening. The video summaries should be given to the student at least a week in advance. Make every attempt to face the class at all times to allow for lip reading. Avoid writing on the board and talking at the same time. Try not to walk around the classroom while taking at this makes it difficult for the students to maintain visual contact, making lip reading possible. Try not to stand with a light or window behind you as this can cast shadows which will make it more difficult to lip read. In addition to speech, it is useful to make use of all available means of expressions. Examples are the facial expressions, gestures, and etc. Notify students with hearing impairment of any important sound stimuli, examples the fire alarm for fire drill. After writing something on the board or showing a slide with information which the students need to write down, catch the attention of the student with hearing impairment to establish eye contact before continuing with the lecture. If you ask the class to read a piece of text, please wait until the student with a hearing impairment has finished before continuing to speak. They are unable to read and lip read at the same time. Allow more time to make communication effective. Note takers work by necessity, several seconds behind the speaker. This means that a student with hearing impairment often sees a question start as hearing students hear it end. As a result, it can be very difficult for a student with hearing impairment to fully participate on an even basis with their hearing peers. A lecturer, when demonstrating experiments or etc., should be aware of this time delay and should allow the student to actually see the activity and grasp it before moving on. The use of assistive devices in teaching environments such as FM systems is encouraged, where a lecturer would be required to use a transmitter, sometimes with a lapel microphone. The presence of note takers in the teaching environment should not be posed. Hearing peers should be encouraged to be respectful of the rights and needs of students with hearing impairment, such as keeping preferential seats open in the front of the class. Group discussions are notoriously difficult for students with hearing impairment as people often speak over one another. The optimum size of a group is between 6 and 10. If a group is bigger than this, it is unlikely that people will be near enough to lip read and following contributions to the discussions becomes more complicated. If students with hearing impairment are not given the opportunity to locate the speaker, they will miss some or all of these discussions and will either not contribute or very reluctant to do so for fear of repeating previously voiced comments. Try to control group situations, allowing one person to speak at a time. They should raise their hand before speaking and allow more time contributions from students with hearing impairment. If the student is using a loop system in the venue, please remember that all contributors to the discussion will need to speak into the microphone. Ensure that this is known to the group before the discussion starts. Questions and contributions from elsewhere in the room may not be heard, so it is useful to repeat the question before going to answer to facilitate communication.